Dear Father in heaven, we thank you again for the time that we have to come together to study. Ask, Lord, that your Holy Spirit can be here as we open up your word together. Help us to understand the things that we are studying. And we pray, Lord, that we can sort out all these various difficulties, all this information, and that we can present it to others in a way that's simple, that they can understand, that we can learn to adapt it to the various minds. And we know, Lord, that there's so many things happening in the world right now, so many distractions. But we ask, Lord, that your Spirit can cut through all those distractions, that you can reach the minds of those who need to know this message and who would be receptive. And we pray this and thank you in Jesus' name. Amen. So when we, just sort of as an overview of what we've done so far, sort of a simple way, we've mostly been focusing on Ezekiel. And we know that he predicted, and last time we went through his literal 390 and 40 days. And we have touched on some of this already. So we know on the 15th day of the 8th month, in 977 BC, Jeroboam was offering, and this is the reference point that Ezekiel uses, which is in 1 Kings 18 or 13, and in 2 Kings 23, this is verse 15 to 18, I think, or 18 to 21. I think it's 18 to 21. I could be wrong.
That's 15 to 18.
15 to 18. 15 to 18. 13 verse 1 to 5. And this would be in 627 BC that this is fulfilled after 350 years. And then we have in 622, we have Josiah's Passover. And this is the this is the 13th year of Josiah, and this is the 18th year of Josiah. And then we have a period of time. We come to 592 BC, and this is Ezekiel 1:1. And this is July 21st, and it's the 5th day of the 4th month. And this is 30 years from this event here. So this is 30 years. And this is, of course, a period of 5 years. And then he's going to be predicting an event that's going to be specifically the siege, if you wanted to look at it, which would be 587. And this would be on the 10th day of the 10th month, which is in the beginning of 587, September 5th or 6th, I can't remember. And then there's going to be a period of a year and a half. And then there's actually a few different events that occur here. We have on the 9th day of the 4th month, in 586, this is the death of Zedekiah. That's the walls of Jerusalem are broken down. And this is July 18th, 586. And then 30 days later, on August 18th, on the 10th day of the 5th month, you're going to have the temple is going to be burned to the ground. And then you have a period of 6 months, depends where you count from here, but it'd be 5 months. if you go from here, but there's this other period of time. We'll just say it's 5 months here from this event to the 5th day of the 10th month. So it's kind of an inversion of this date, and that's the escapee. So I think we covered all this, if I remember correctly, in the last presentation on this. So here we have basically the line that Ezekiel has. Now we know that Jehoiachin's captivity is going to happen, and this is also referenced, but I didn't put it in here. But this is 597, and it's March 16th, and it's I think it's the 3rd day, it's the 2nd day of the 12th month, if I remember correctly. And it's here that Jehoiachin is taken captive, and this is where he counts, in this period, it's this 5 years. There's this other 5 years that he refers to in the 5th year. And we know that he's let out of prison in 561 BC. This is a period of 36 years. And we also know that the 70 weeks ends here in 34 AD. So I'm just going to put 70 times 7 for the 70 weeks. Didn't put the week of Christ in there. But we know that this is a period of 36 years. And in 70 AD, on the 10th day of the 5th month, the temple was again destroyed. This being from this point, not from this point, but from this point, is a period of 666 years. And this is Leviticus 26, and this is Deuteronomy 28. And this ties then Babylon, which is Nebuchadnezzar here, by this 666 years to Rome. So it's tying Babylon, which is, of course, this is all pagan, the pagan nations, and we know that the papacy is going to take paganism and clothe it in Christian garb. But it's the mystery religions, this part of Babylon, that becomes hidden in the Catholic Church, in the papacy. But it's inherited all the way from Babylon. And now, on the 1843 chart, there's a date that Miller used, and it's this date for the League of the Jews. And I'm just going to put this in here. This is kind of an aside, but Miller understood that from 158 BC to 538, or to 530 BC, 530 AD, he counted this as a period of 666 years, if I'm doing that right. I think I'm doing that wrong. So if I can't add those together, yeah, that would be wrong. This would be 7. Can't remember which date he chose here. Yes, it would be 538. So this would be a period of 666 years if there was a 0 year. But obviously it's 1 year short. And this is an interesting point. In Ezekiel chapter 8, verse 1, we have this, the 6th year of the 6th month and the 5th day that he has his 3rd vision. And this would be 665 years. And I keep running into this, and this is sort of an aside. It's not specifically, addressed in a simple way. But these things that are 1 day off or 1 year off, there sort of are some kind of a warning. Not really sure what they mean. I just know that they show up. But Miller had this 665 days. And what he had is this was the end of Greece, where the Rome now comes into play with this league. And then this would be the period of time that Rome, pagan, ruled, if you look at Miller's studies. But of course, it only ends up being 665 years. Though we could argue that it's 666 ordinal years. And so I would have no problem with that. So this idea of this 666 years was seen by Miller. But also, if I go from 508 and I go back here, I come to the date, an actual 666 years. And this would be try to remember the date. Guess we just take 30. Would that be 127? I think that I'm doing this wrong.
That 158's not right.
This one's not right. What's that? No, I think it's wrong. This is wrong, isn't it?
Yeah, 538 plus 158 is 696.
Yeah, so this would be this one.
508, yes.
Yeah, that's it. So this is, so this is the one that he had as 666 years. And then if I go here, now I get this backwards. So this is 508 AD. And then I can go to 538. Yes, because I was going all backwards. It didn't really make any sense. And then I would go, it's actually 127 BC. Or, yeah, I think that's the one it is. Anyway, this is also a period of 666 years. But this one, of course, is ordinal. This one's cardinal. And this is the period when Judea independence occurred. So one of the things that, and this is way off topic really, but one of the things that Miller taught is he taught that these kingdoms were continuous and that the Jews were always under the oppression of these powers. But in reality, in this year here, 127 BC, it's 129. I'm going backwards the wrong way. 129 BC. There we go. 129 BC. This is when Judea was independent for the first time. And its independence continued until the siege of Jerusalem by Rome, by Pompey. So the idea that they were always under the oppression of these other powers isn't true. They may have had a league here, but they were completely independent. They weren't under control of any foreign power for a period of time. So it's just this idea that we can have these 666 years also exists in this history. So this 666 years and this 66 and this 66, I think they're all related in the ideas that they're connecting two different things here. This one's connecting Rome with 508, and this one's connecting a period in where they're independent and now they're going to become under slavery. So there's some kind of chiasm in here. It hasn't been developed, but and it's not a simple thing to address. But the main point, getting back up to here, is that we see that Ezekiel is predicting specifically a siege of Jerusalem that's going to happen here, based on lying on his left side for 390 days for northern Israel, and then which represents 390 years, and then on his right side for 40 years, or 40 days, which represents 40 years. So he's predicting this event. But there's also a year and a half in here that is the period of the kings. And he's also predicting this event, the 10th day of the 5th month, but he does it indirectly. And we went through his literal time lying on his left side and found that there were specific events that, or dates that are marked. So I'm going to get rid of this here. And these dates are, once he finishes lying on his left side, we have the 10th day of the 5th month marked. And this is, I'm going to change all this. Let's get rid of this. So we're going to have, maybe I could have left that, but yeah, I'm going to leave that. Just, okay. So if we go back here, we can take this as being 597. And here he's going to be in 592. This is where he has his first vision. And then he's going to lie on his left side. So this is the date, the 5th day of the 4th month, which is July 21st. That's midnight. He lies on his left side, and then he'll start lying on his right side on August 15th, 591. But the day before that, the last day he begins to lie on his left side, is the 10th day of the 5th month. And then he's going to have his second vision in here, but he's then going to have his third vision, which is Ezekiel 20, verse 1, and that's on the 10th day of the 5th month in 590. And then Jerusalem is going to be destroyed here, and this is 4 years later, on the 10th day of the 5th month in 586. And then we know, based on this 666 years, that we're going to have the temple once again destroyed on the 10th day of the 5th month. And so this symbol of the 10th day of the 5th month here in this history predicts this event. And so we're going to start looking at the prophecy of Revelation 9, Josiah Lich's prophecy. And we're going to see that there's a basis for taking this as a model to apply to Revelation 9. And there's a number of things or reasons why we can do that. And we sort of touched on them. The name of the study is the Prophecies of Josiah. So one is, we have the name Josiah, King Josiah, associated with this line. We also have Josiah Lich, who's going to do Revelation 9. We also have these repeated dates that are hidden, that aren't seen until our time at the end of the world, that we for the first time see these hidden dates and recognize them. We also have, here he's illustrating that he can make a prediction, but that prediction can also be applied in the future. And we also, I think we touched on it a little bit, I'm not sure, but before 70 AD and after 34 and before 34 AD, before this time, Jesus' disciples asked him about the destruction of Jerusalem, about the end of the world. And Jesus says, it's not for you to know the times or the seasons. I can't remember if we discussed that. The point is, in this history from Christ to 70 AD, they were given some signs or warnings. But back when Jesus was alive, when the disciples asked, Jesus says, it's not for you to know the times or the seasons that God has hid in his own power. But yet they were to understand them, or they could have understood them, if they had understood this prophecy. So they did, of course, obey the signs. So the signs came where Jerusalem was surrounded by armies, and then under Cestius's siege, and then 3.5 years later, Jerusalem was destroyed under the siege by Titus. So there's a lot here in this history, which we might come back to at some point as we re-examine it. The main thing is we have this structure, and when it comes to using dates and numbers, we have to recognize that it's not about just doing math, that we actually have structure associated with it. And so when we when we try to use numbers and dates, without structure, there's no meaning. And so I've emphasized that in lots of the presentations that I've been doing on other topics. And so it's this structure here that points forward to interpreting Revelation 9 the way that we have. And so we're going to look at Revelation 9. Now, I've given people some notes. One of the set of notes I've given people is a study on the Seven Trumpets. And I don't know if everybody understands the Seven Trumpets well, but I'm going to do a brief review of those. Very brief, not in any kind of detail. So let's look at Revelation chapter 8. So Revelation chapter 8 is the opening of not the seals, but the trumpets. So it's in the seventh seal is mentioned at the beginning. And then we're going to have the seven trumpets. And I'm not going to do like any kind of detailed thing here other than just a really cursory description of them. These trumpets are judgments against Eastern or Western Rome. So when we look at the first four trumpets, these are all judgments against the Western Roman Empire, and it's the process by which these nations, which they called barbarian nations, but they're nations that were not Roman, they came in and fought against the Roman Empire and helped take it down. And there's very complex history, lots of interesting things in this history, lots of important dates, but we're not going to really go through it other than to deal with a couple of symbols. One is, we know that Constantinople or Rome was divided by Constantine. Constantine moved his capital to Constantinople, and he divided the kingdom, was divided between his three sons. So he didn't divide the kingdom, but when he died, his kingdom was divided. And so it talks about the three parts. Now, so the parts of that kingdom are really what's talked about when it's talked about a third part. So there's different parts of this kingdom that were conquered at different times. Now, when we get to, and I don't know how much I want, I mean, I know that there's a lot in here that I would like to touch on, but I want to get to some of the symbols that are here. And it's in, so I'm just getting here, I'm going to have to go through some of this. I can't really skip over it. So when we look at the first angel that sounded, there followed hail, fire mingled with blood, and were cast upon the earth. And a third part of the trees was burnt up, and all green grass was burnt up. And the second angel sounded, and there was a great mountain burning with fire, was cast into the sea. The third part of the sea became blood. And the third part of the creatures which were in the sea and had life died, and the third part of the ships were destroyed. So this is all about Western Rome. The third part sounded, the third angel sounded, and there fell a great star from heaven, burning as it were a lamp, and it fell upon the third part of the rivers. And the name of that star is called Wormwood, and the third part of the waters became wormwood, and many men died of the waters, because they were made bitter. And the fourth angel sounded, and a third part of the sun was smitten, a third part of the moon, a third part of the stars, so as a third part of them was darkened, and the day shone not for a third part of it, and the night likewise. Now there's different ways in which people have interpreted some of these symbols, and I guess what I'll do is bring up some of my notes that I had on that. So I have a paper called The Seven Trumpets, which I think I did actually include it in, So this, yeah, I did include this one. So this is Josiah Lich's prophecy. This is one of the newer revisions of it. I do have older versions of it. And I deal a lot with the idea that some people think the trumpets are the 7 last plagues. They have similarities to them, but just because they have similarities, because they are plagues, doesn't mean that they're the 7 last plagues. And I deal here with the 3 parts of Rome. So I'm going to blow this up a little bit so people can see it better. And we have this map here, which shows the different parts that were divided. So you got Western Rome, which is Britain, Gaul, Spain, Italy, Africa, Illyricum. I don't think that's how you pronounce it. Some of these words, you read them and you never think about how they're pronounced. So, but anyway, it's I. How do you say it? How do you say it?
Yeah, I had it in my mind there. I was going to say it, but
yeah, it's one of those words.
Illyrium.
Illyrium.
I think it's Illyricum.
Illyricum.
Illyrium.
Illyricum. I think
Illyricum. Just think of lyric.
Okay,
Illyricum.
Illyricum. Okay, maybe that's correct. And then we have so that's basically, you can see there it's Greece, parts of Greece, and there's all these other areas. And then you have Eastern Rome, which is, of course, where Constantinople is. It is the south and the western part of the Black Sea and goes down into Africa, parts of Africa, or basically the Middle East. It has, of course, Syria and Egypt, where Western Rome doesn't have Egypt. It has Carthage, all that area. So, so this is how it exists in about 500 AD. And so that's what the third part is referring to. Now, the part of trees and green grass can represent people. They can also represent governments. Trees can represent governments. We would get that from the story of Daniel chapter 4, where Nebuchadnezzar is seen as being this great tree. And there's other illustrations in the Bible where trees represent governments, grass represents people. And so it refers to these destructions that happened under the Vandals and the Huns and all these different groups. So Attila the Hun, Alaric. And I don't want to go into the details of these things, but you can see the first ones, Alaric, and how the symbols apply in the Vandals. So they're all going to apply in particular ways that would be understood once you look at the history. Why the mountain would be thrown into the sea, for instance, would describe what actually occurred in a symbolic way. And then you see there the Heruli, and before that, the Huns. So these were the powers that took down Western Rome, and to some degree, if you look back at some of these maps, you'll see Illyricum and even parts of Eastern Rome were touched by these invasions a little bit. But Constantinople wasn't. So Constantinople is the capital of the Byzantine Empire and Eastern Rome. So, there's a whole bunch of things dealing with these trumpets. I would, really like to do a study on the trumpets, but that would be quite a big study. And I have presented it. There are videos online on, I think, my website. I have the presentations I did, these original presentations that I did back in 2015. And now what we're really going to look at is the fifth and sixth trumpets. So these are the judgments against Eastern Rome. And these are the ones that have Islam in These are the ones that we're interested in, because these are really what Josiah Lich came to understand for the first time correctly, the basic chronology of these trumpets. So, I suggest that people read through these. I'm going to go through this not using this paper, but using another paper. This one, which I call July 18th, 2020, Made Simple, which probably it isn't, but at least I like to say that it was. So in this paper, and I'm not going to go through it in detail, but I really want to address Josiah Lich. So I mentioned at the beginning the outline of what I'm going to do, so that Josiah Lich's prophecy is connected to Ezekiel's prophecy, which we've already talked about. And so in this paper, I actually start with Josiah Lich's prophecy, and then I go to Ezekiel's prophecy, and then I go to Samuel Snow's letters. And then and when I wrote this paper, this was quite a while ago, it would have been well over a year ago that I originally wrote it. So we have November 9th in there, Tess Lambert's mentioned, and that's just a reality. She's the one who addressed this. But also going to address the PBM, the prediction before midnight, which at that time, that's what I was understanding we were doing. But this was not really accepted by P&T. So we're going to start reading through some of this. Josiah Lich was born April 4th, 1809, and on May 30th, 1838, he made this prediction. But when will this power, Turkey, be overthrown? According to the calculations already made, that the 5 months ended in 1449, the hour, 15 days, the day, 1 year, the month, 30 years, and the year, 360 years, in all, 391 years and 15 days, will end in AD 1840, sometime in the month of August. So this is a statement that he made, as you can see, on May 30th, 1838. And this was, there's a number of important points here. The first off, his birthday. So his birthday is an interesting date. And so I'm going to draw this here. Why is somebody's birthday important? I'm not really sure, but they can be symbolic. And in the case of Josiah Lich, he is born April 4th, 1809. Now, if I'm going to have this date, July 27th, if I'm going to have this date in 1809, if I'm going to have this date be the 26th day of the 4th month, this is the date that will be the first day of the 1st month. So even in Josiah Lich's birthday, there was a key that points to this idea of the 26th day of the 4th month. It's a point that he never even noticed. When he made his prediction, he never took into account the biblical date. Now, in the year that he was born, this April 4th was not the first day of the 1st month, but April 4th was the first day of the 1st month on the Julian calendar. So if this is a Gregorian date, this is the date he was born. We're also going to have an event here, and we're going to see that, which is the Treaty of Dardanelles. But if we actually went here, so this would have been the 14th day of the 4th month, in actuality. because 12 days later in the 1800s was April 4th, the Julian date. So this was the first day of the first month. And in 1809, 12 days later, followed July 27th, which was the 26th day of the fourth month. And I want to address this in a number of ways. So I know I'm kind of jumping ahead, but some of us are familiar with this, but familiar with the prophecy. But I want to address this for a very specific reason. So I'm going to lay out the line as we understand it, without going through the details yet. Just starting with the line, not explaining how we derived it. But we know that on 1299 is the 27th of July, but I'm going to put my Gregorian dates on the top. It's August 3rd. But this is the date, July 27th, 1299, that Josiah Lich used as the starting point. And this is the 26th day of the fourth month on the biblical calendar. So this is the Julian date. This is the Gregorian date. And from there, he counted 150 years, which is 150 days based on this as being a period of 5 months. So we will look at that. We will go back and look at this in detail. But when he looked at this, he didn't consider whether he had a Julian date or a Gregorian date. So to him, it was just July 27th. Now, if I went to July 27th Julian, it would not be the 26th day of the fourth month. I would actually have to go in 1449. If I took the July 27th Julian date and just counted 150 years, it wouldn't line up. But if I took the biblical date, the 26th day of the fourth month, it would be July 27th Gregorian, but it would be July 18th Julian. And then he just simply went over here. So we're going to just kind of lay this out, and then we're going to go through in detail and fill it out. So he went over here, and he counted 391 years and 15 days. And when he did that, he didn't consider that if he had started with the Julian date, he would have started here with July 27th Julian. And if he actually counted the number of days, he would not have come to 390 years and 15 days ending on August 11th, 1840. So if he had actually taken this date, he wouldn't have arrived at it. And if he had taken July 27th, a Julian, like this, he again would not have arrived at this date. There's different dates depending on how he would have argued this. But then he went here, so we're going to do it like this. This is July 27th Gregorian, and he counted 15 days from there. Now, in order to get 391 years and 15 days, he would have had to start on July 27th Gregorian. That means he would have still had to start on the 26th day of the fourth month in order to get this count. And if he had started on July 27th Julian, he would not have got that count. He would have had to choose July 18th Julian, but he had no basis to do that because he didn't know that that was the biblical date. Now, he could have also used the Gregorian date here and counted 150 years and arrived at August 3rd, 1449. And then he would have counted 391 years and 15 days, and he would have had to count the 15 days from August 3rd. And if he had done that, he would have ended up with with August 18th as, I think it's August 18th, so for 20, yeah, so 3rd, 15th. So August 18th, I think that, no, that's not right. If he would have started on August 3rd and he'd added
23rd, is it?
23rd, yes, there you go. Because this Well, if he started on August 8th, though, August 3rd, I'm saying. If he had started on August 3rd, he would have ended on August 18th. That's what I'm trying to say. Because if he had started here, August 3rd Gregorian, he went to August 3rd Gregorian, and then he would go to August 3rd Gregorian, and then he would have had that. Now, he would have, so that's the point, is he would have arrived, he would have had different ways, if he had counted it differently, if he had counted Gregorian right from the beginning, he would have arrived at August 18th. If he had started here and counted the Gregorian date, or he would have arrived at a different date. He had actually 4 different ways that he could have counted it, but he never considered any of them other than just taking that date, July 27th, July 27th, July 27th, and then adding the 15 days. So he could have counted it different ways. And that's because in these years, the difference between the Julian and the Gregorian date varies. Now, when you get to this history, August 8th would have been where he would have counted the 15 days from, because the Julian has drifted a further 5 days from here to here. So then he would have had August 23rd. I know that's confusing. The point that I'm trying to make out, to make clear, is that if he uses the 26th day of the 4th month, it's the only way that he's consistent. It's the only way that he could really do it. But yet he had no understanding of the biblical calendar. He simply just used the symbols. But the thing is, he arrived at the right day, because we know in this year, 1449, on the Gregorian calendar, April 4th was the first day of the first month. Here, April 4th was the first day of the first month on the Julian calendar. But on these 2 years, 1449 and 1840, the first day of the first month was April 4th. And so that would mean that the biblical date would still be July 27th in each of these years. So the 26th day of the 4th month becomes this marker, just like we saw in Ezekiel with the 10th day of the 5th month. Again, it's hidden to some degree. He interprets the prophecy correctly, and he's presenting at least the time correctly. But we know that Josiah Lich ended up rejecting his interpretation of Revelation 9 after the passing of the time. And one of the reasons he did it is, even though initially they believed the prophecy was fulfilled, it didn't pan out the way that they thought afterwards. So they understood that that Turkey subjected itself to the Western powers, and initially they believed that that was a fulfillment of prophecy. But they expected Turkey to cease to exist as a government, and that never happened. Even though they were always subject to the Western powers, Turkey continued. So as time went on, and they had come to reject some of their understanding of the prophetic periods, they now looked for a new ending to this prophecy of Revelation 9. Now, Adventists have maintained that this prophecy was correct. And in reality, the event did fulfill the prediction, but not exactly like Josiah Lich imagined. It was correct, the prediction was correct, the time was correct. And so we can say he had a fulfillment of, it was fulfilled. And we can see that in Ezekiel's prophecy. You know, the siege of Jerusalem happened, and Jerusalem was destroyed on the 10th day of the 5th month. But there are other events in the future that also apply. And we're going to look at those. So we're going to look at, it's more than just July 18th, 2020. We're going to look at other dates and other events that also are marked symbolically by this prophecy. So this prophecy extends beyond 1840. It extends all the way to our time. But it does so based on the same principle that Ezekiel used to extend, well, he didn't do it, but we can do it. We can extend his prophecy to AD 70, because it's all in there. The period of time counting of Josiah Lich's, or Josiah's captivity, brings you to 70 AD for the 666th year of his captivity, and that it happens to fall with the destruction of the temple on the 10th day of the 5th month, in result of the Jews' rejection 36 years prior to 70 AD, Jews' rejection of the gospel, shows that that structure exists, and the structure exists based on Ezekiel. So we can do the same thing here with this prophecy. There's nothing wrong with understanding, the understanding of Josiah Lich, but we can see that it's going to extend further. So I showed you that, and I have to show you one more detail. But in order to do that, I'm going to have to write it out again, and we're going to go through it to understand this prophecy. There's another important detail as we go through this again. So first, let's go to I'm going to go just to the scriptures here, read this passage. And if anybody has any questions, feel free to comment. It does help me to know that people are understanding things or not understanding things. So when we go to Revelation chapter 9, we have the fifth angel sounded, and I saw a star fall from heaven unto the earth, and to him was given the key of the bottomless pit. Now, we already had a star falling in Revelation chapter 8. And that's in 8 verse 10. The third angel sounded, and there fell a great star from heaven, burning as it were a lamp, and it fell upon the third part of the rivers and upon the fountains of waters, and the name of the star is called Wormwood, which means bitter. Now, a star falling from heaven obviously brings us to the idea of a satanic power. So we know Satan was cast out of heaven, and so these nations are given this characteristic. And we see that also with Revelation 9, the star that falls from heaven to the earth is understood to be Muhammad. And it says, he opened the bottomless pit, and there arose a smoke out of the pit as the smoke of a great furnace, and the sun and the air were darkened by reason of the smoke of the pit. So here we have this bottomless pit, again another symbol of satanic power. And this smoke arises out of this pit. And then in verse 3, and there came out of the smoke locusts upon the earth, and unto them was given power, as the scorpions of the earth have power. Now, I could do a very detailed study in this, but the symbol of locusts is really important when you understand Islam. And we're going to address it a little bit as we go through this. I remember years ago studying Revelation 9 that even a lot of Adventists had adopted a modern view or an evangelical view of Revelation 9. And this type of view was that these were symbolic of, like, locusts would be helicopters. So this sort of thing that he's seen something in the future, and these are helicopters, and this is talking about our time. Now, no way do we ever do anything like that in our understanding of prophecy. We understand that Josiah Lich was correct in his interpretation, and we don't reapply this prophecy to our time. We don't take the time elements in this prophecy, like just reapply this prophecy and then try to take these time elements and say that they're this based upon a reapplication. But we can see that the time elements have an application, not because of a reapplication of the prophecy, but because of the application of the prophecy. That we can see that the end is the beginning is explained, or the end is explained by the beginning. So the end and the beginning are connected, and that the end goes to our time. So in no way are we trying to interpret it in some ways like the evangelicals will. We keep and we maintain the pioneer understanding of Revelation 8 and 9. There might be some details that we notice that they may not have noticed. And so we're going to look at those. Now, when we come to verse 4, and it says, it was commanded them that they should not hurt the grass of the earth, neither any green thing, neither any tree, but only those men which have not the seal of God on their foreheads. So this command, we understand, is the command of Abu Bakr. So I'm going to go to my other notes here, and we'll start looking at this. So in my notes here, it says the 5 months, and we haven't got there yet. So maybe I should go back and read that. So I need to read the next verse. And to them it was given that they should not kill them, but that they should be tormented 5 months. And their torment was as the torment of a scorpion when he striketh a man. So this period of 5 months that's mentioned here, Lich speaks of, the 5 months Lich speaks of are a period of 150 years referred to in Revelation 9, verse 10 to 12, when they, the locust Islam, had a king, Othman, over them, and could hurt but not kill. In Proverbs 30:27, it states that locusts have no king, while here the symbol does, due to the uniting of Islam under Othman. This period of 5 months is referred to as the First Woe in Revelation 9:12, and occurs under the fifth trumpet. That's actually written a little bit confusing to me, so I'm going to go through and explain this. So we're going to go back here to this history. Now, we're going to go to Abu Bakr's command. So this is in 632 AD. Abu Bakr's command. This is the death of Muhammad. And there's a period of 5 months here, which is 150 years. It goes to the first Treaty of Constantinople in 782. This period of 5 months is not touched by Uriah Smith or the pioneers, but they do recognize Abu Bakr's command. So I found it odd that they see Abu Bakr's command and they put them here, but when they start the period of 5 months, they don't start it here. And also, the sixth trumpet doesn't start in 632. It starts, and the place they started is they started back here. So they go to 606, and there's a number of reasons why they chose this date. But the idea here is that this is where Muhammad begins his deception. This is where he goes to the caves in Medina. And so they choose this date, though, for other reasons that they didn't realize, that this date was already chosen for a period of 1,260 years, that I don't think they fully understood how that was connected. So they chose this date that was already a part of another prophecy of 1,260 years, but that is the date that the pioneers chose for Muhammad, 606. And in 632 AD, this is when Muhammad dies. Now, there is also another date here, which you may be familiar with, and this is 622. And in 622, this is the flight from Mecca. And when Muhammad flees from Mecca, it's not on July 18th. It's later on in the year. But they chose this year to start their calendar. And on their calendar, the first day of the first month of the first year is July 18th. So this date shows up in Islamic history with this July 18th. So it's, to me, it's an important point that their calendar starts here on July 18th in 622. So we know then 10 years later, Muhammad's going to die. And this is where you get Abu Bakr. Abu Bakr is the first caliph, that means successor of Muhammad. And he doesn't organize the people like Othman does, but he's sort of a leader. He's the religious leader, like Muhammad was. And in this period of time, they can hurt but not kill. So this period of 150 years is going to be compared to another period of 150 years that are mentioned later. So we're going to have this period of 150 years, which is going to start on July 27th, 1299. So this period here and this period here is important, and I'm not going to look at this yet. I might look at it a bit later when we analyze this a bit more. Once we get to July 18th, 2020, then this becomes more significant, the period in between here. So, let's go on and continue reading, and we'll go back to the scriptures. And in those days men shall seek death and shall not find it, and shall desire to die, and death shall flee from them. And the shapes of the locusts were like unto horses prepared unto battle, and on their heads were as it were crowns of gold, and their faces as the faces of men. And they had hair as the hair of women, and their teeth were as the teeth of lions. And they had breastplates as it were breastplates of iron, and the sound of their wings was as the sound of chariots of many horses running to battle. And they had tails like unto scorpions. And there were in their stings in their tails, and their power was to hurt men 5 months. So here we have in Revelation 9:10, the second period of 9 months. Now, we know that locusts do not have, according to the Bible, do not have a king over them. And so let's go to one of my notes. To do something here. Sorry about that. I'm just going to put this on pause for a second. I have to correct something here. I keep having these notifications popping up. Okay, so I just had to turn off some notifications of some group that I never asked to be in, and they're just chatting with each other, so they keep showing up. So the 5 months Lich speaks of, here in my notes, I better do that. The 5 months Lich speaks of are a period of 150 years, referred to in Revelation 9, verse 10 to 12, right? So he's not referring to the ones in Revelation 9, verse 5, though they just take them as one thing, but he doesn't distinguish between them. So when they, locusts, Islam, had a king, Ottoman, over them, they could hurt but not kill. Proverbs 30, verse 7 states that locusts have no king, while here the symbol does. Due to the uniting of Islam under Ottoman, the period of 5 months is referred to as the First Woe in Revelation 9:12, and occurs under the 5th trumpet. So I think I accidentally said the 6th trumpet. So we got here the 5th trumpet begins. So this is the 5th trumpet. And we can see that the woe is not the trumpet. This is the first woe. But the first woe is not any of this history until we get to Ottoman, right? So we have the Ottoman Empire.
Switch the view, please.
Yes, I was just thinking that. I hadn't switched. Okay, so you can see here we have the 5th trumpet, the first woe. This is the first woe. This is Ottoman. We do not have the trumpets and the woes begin at the same time. They do here end at the same time. So when the 5th trumpet ends, the second woe is going to begin. And I've done studies on this in my one paper on the trumpets, where I deal a lot with the restraints and the loosenings that occur. So even though there's a period of a woe, in this woe, they cannot kill. They can hurt but not kill. And they are loosed here just like they're loosed here. And here they're restrained. This is the treaty, and I call it the Treaty of Constantinople. It's sometimes not referred to, it's hard to find it under that name. But it's the first Treaty of Constantinople. There's lots of them. But this is the first time they went into a treaty in this history. And obviously they've, in this period of time, we have some history. While I had paused the recording there, Stephen had brought out that in 718, there was this siege of Constantinople by Islam. And I'm going to probably address that more later on. So there's a history here, and then they have this treaty. So this ends that attack against Islam. Now this period of history here is very interesting. This is the period of time in which we have the Romans, or not the Romans, but the Roman Catholic Church has the Crusades to take back Jerusalem. So there's a whole interesting history in here that, you know, we're not going to address. But we get here, and we now have the Ottoman Empire arise. And during this period of time, they're obviously waging all kinds of war, but they're now in an organized fashion, where here it was not really organized. Now that he's pulled together all of these Islamic sultans so that they're working under a king. So here they're locusts, but they don't have a king. Here they're locusts, but they do. So here they would have no king, and here they would have a king. Now, we addressed the point here that Josiah Lich had no event. He just simply put the date July 27th to count 150 years, ending in 1449. Now, in his July 27th date, as we noted earlier, he didn't consider whether it was Julian or Gregorian. So I always like to put my Gregorian dates at the top. So this is August 3rd, and I'll put my Julian date here, July 27th. So July 27th, here's a Julian date, but here I choose it as a Gregorian date, which he didn't distinguish between. Now the Gregorian calendar is not invented here, so technically he would have been thinking that this is the same calendar. But if we use this symbol, the 26th day of the fourth month, here, then we would see that this is July 18th Julian, which again is a symbol, same symbol that we have here for the start of the Islamic calendar. And here we have it connected with July 27th and connected with the 26th day of the fourth month. Now, when Josiah Lich did this, we just talked about it briefly. He didn't just start here and then come to this date, August 11th, 1840. He had this period of 150 years. So we're going to look at this as we look at the passages. So when we looked at verse 11 there again, and it says they had a king over them, which is the angel of the bottomless pit, whose name in the Hebrew tongue is Abaddon, but in the Greek tongue hath his name Apollyon. These mean destroyer. So it says, one woe is past, and behold, there come two woes more hereafter. So that 150 years, they have this king over them. Obviously, Othman is not the king the entire time. There's his successors. But now we're going to have the sixth angel going to sound right when the first woe ends. And the sixth angel sounded, and I heard a voice from the four horns of the golden altar which is before God. saying to the sixth angel which had the trumpet, loose the four angels which are bound in the great river Euphrates. And the four angels were loosed, which had prepared for an hour and a day and a month and a year for to slay the third part of men. Now, there is a bunch of symbolism here which we don't generally touch upon. Why are they bound in the great river Euphrates? Why are there four angels? There's different ways to look at it. But one of the things that we can see that this is showing the place where they come from. And also we can see again that there's this four. And what ends up happening here in this history in 1449 is here you have Ottoman, but it's here in this history we have a situation where there's four Turkish sultans that Constantine the 11th, who is the king of the Roman Empire, the Eastern Roman Empire, he's the he's the continuation of Caesar, right? Their kings. So, and he's Constantine's successor. So he's Constantine the 11th, and he's the last king of the Eastern Roman Empire. So Byzantine Empire. Now, I guess emperor.
Stop sharing.
What's that? I'm not sharing again. Okay, there we go. Thank you. So we have here this period here of Constantine the 11th. So Constantine the 11th is he's the emperor, right? So he's the last Roman emperor of the Eastern Roman Empire. And what he does is he submits to the Turkish Sultan. Now there's basically four Turkish sultans, but the idea is he does not want to act independent. He believes that if he's submissive, that they will allow him to continue, that they will be at peace. But it doesn't turn out that way. It turns out that 4 years later, Constantinople will be destroyed, and that will be the end of Constantine, the 11th. So in this history, they're going to be able to hurt but not kill. But in this history, they're now loosed. And they're described as the four angels out of the river Euphrates. If you look at the area where Islam has its territory, it would include that area. So it would include the East. And these are then the powers that are going to come against Constantinople by the Black Sea. Now, so this symbol, the 26th day of the fourth month, obviously, as we've talked about, would be the start to count the 391 years and 15 days. But we do have this 4 years in here, which I'm not going to draw it in. But there's 4 years from when Constantine submits to when Constantinople is destroyed. Now, he doesn't submit, or no event is actually fulfilled here on July 27th or July 18th. We just have no event, because this would be July 18th in their history, not July 27th. We have no event to mark this other than the start. So the way that Josiah Lich did this is he included this in this period of 391 years and 15 days. So I'm going to put this like that. You got 391 years and 15 days. And we're going to try to understand this a little bit better on how he did it. So one is we know that he didn't start with this date. He started with this date, July 27th. And he counted 150 years. So he added these two together. He took the 391 and the 150, and he added them together to get 541 years. And so he counts actually 541 years and 15 days to arrive at August 11th, 1840. Now, the other thing is, when you look at his initial application of it, we know that these periods of time, don't go hour, day, month, year, or they go hour, day, month, year, not year, month, day, hour. But the way that he counted it was to go with the larger periods first and to the smaller periods. And the question regarding that, why he did that, I don't know if he thought about it, but the reason why I would do it is in the language itself of this passage. And I'll show you what I mean. So when we look at the 391 years and 15 days, in verse 15 of Revelation 9, it says, the four angels were loosed, which were prepared for an hour, a day, a month, and a year, for to slay the third part of men. Now that language, this word prepared, is kind of peculiar, and it's not really noticed by anybody. But if I go to this here in my Greek, prepare, provide, make ready, and dictionary. Wrong dictionary. There we go. This other word. So this comes from a word, a derivative of 4632, to prepare thoroughly, properly, by external equipment, whereas G2090 refers to an internal fitness, by implication to construct. So, so there's different ways of looking this, but there is this construction that has to go on. This has to be this type of preparation. Now, so when it says they're prepared for an hour, day, and a month of the year, the way that I would look at it is I would look at this goes back, is looking back this way, not looking forward this way. That is, if I'm going to count the hour, day, month, and a year, I'm not going to start here and count an hour, day, month, and year.
Switch again, please.
Okay, thanks. Sorry about that. Okay, so I'm going to start here and work my way backwards. So the preparation of an hour, day, and a month, and a year would suggest to me looking backwards. Now, maybe that doesn't make sense to people, but I originally started looking at this idea of going backwards from here to see where I ended up. And I ended up on a date, February 16th, or 26th, pardon me. This date, February 26th, I believe. I got so many dates in my head. And it goes back to a certain time. It's not that important. But the thing is, this is a symbol when the United States was first attacked in 1993. The World Trade Center was attacked. It was on the date February 26th. And so this to me became a symbol that I could have by just going backwards this way. But if I go to the end of this and also go backwards, I would then do my hour, day, month, and year backwards. So I have had some people try to say that we need to do it this way, an hour, a day, a month, and a year. But another thing is, we always think of things going from left to right when you're writing them. But the Hebrew mind, the Hebrews write from right to left. Though our time is going here from left to right, I can still think of this period of time. So we're going to put this hour and this day and this month and this year in here. So here we're going to have, maybe I'll put it up above as well. So you're going to have an hour. And one of the things about it too, even before we get in interpreting this period, is if I was going to give you a time, like let's say I said 8:15 a.m. the date would be the 6th, the month, August, and the year 1945. This would actually be a way that you would write a date. And this is the way that a lot of people interpret this. They don't interpret it as a period of time. They interpret it as a date, specifically. So they try to do away with Josiah Lich's prophecy by saying that his idea of interpreting this as a period of time makes no sense. The problem that they have there is that in the Jewish mind, a date is a period of time, because you're always counting a date from something. And even we do it this way. If I really want to look at this, I'm from the beginning of the day, 8 hours and 15 minutes. I'm from the beginning of August, 6 days. And August is from the beginning of the year, 1945. And 1945 counts from the time of Christ. And so I could look at this date as a period of time. To me, this is just very obvious. But many people, the way the Western mind thinks is we really just think of a date as a point, not as a period. But really, dates are about a length of time between some marker or some event. So even if you say it's a date, it's still a period of time. Now, the fact that we can interpret this symbolically, and we're going to see that there's lots in this. So we have this, this period of time, which we have divided as a year. So we're going to do it this way. A year equals 360 days, or 360 years. A month, which is 30 years because it's 30 days. So a day for a year, again, equals 30. A day represents a year. A month, a day equals a year. And then when we deal with this last part, an hour, now an hour is going to equal half of a month. And the reason that is that a day represents a year, an hour is 1/24th of a day, and we would then be taking this this portion, this hour, would be 15 days, if we're going to take it out of that. So we're going to take a year, which is 360, and we're going to divide it by 24, and you would equal 15 days. Now, of course, that's the way he worded it, is 15 days. You know, so I probably should put that there. So it's 15 days, but it's also 0.5 months, because we know a month is 30 days. So 15 days is a half of a month. So you can look at it different ways. Now, when he said that there was this 391 years, and he ended it sometime in the month of August, I'm not sure why in 1838 he wasn't more specific, why he couldn't have predicted the day. But he didn't. He didn't really count out the days. He didn't think about it until he got closer to the event, which I think is symbolic of how a God teaches us. Even though we could see details, it's as we approach events that we start to refine our calculations, our expectations, our understanding of the event that's approaching. We can see that with the Millerites also in 1844, as they first had about the year 1843, then they had the Jewish year 1843, and then as they went on, they refined it to October 22nd, 1844. So there's this progression that happens. But, you know, he could have just done the calculation and come to that conclusion. And I just gotta, I'll pause this for a second. I gotta correct this here. So, okay, so I just corrected that light there. Otherwise, you have a lot of glare on the screen. So here we have this period of 391 years and 15 days. Now, when he marked this out, he didn't he didn't think about the dates that are here. But we're going to look at those dates and see that they're very significant. So if we're going to count the biblical date, the 26th day of the 4th month, on each of these lines, and we're going to have the 26th day of the 4th month in 1809. Oops. 1809, because this is 360 years from 1449. And then we're going to count another 30 years to get 1839. And then we're going to count another year to get 1840. So we're going to have this date here in 1840. That is going to be the 26th day of the 4th month. And we know then we're going to count from this date 15 days if we're going to be consistent. Now, when we look at these dates in these years, we can line them up with July, oops, I should do it this way, July 27th. For these two, these are going to be Julian date. But this one here is going to be a Gregorian date. And so we have these mixtures of Julian and Gregorian dates in this prophecy. And we saw this mixture right here. This is a Julian date, July 27th. This is a Gregorian date. And so I could line up July 27th with the 26th day of the 4th month in these years. Now in this one, it ends up being July 15th as the Julian date, lining up with this. And these end up being August 8th, and I'm just going to write 8/8. So these are all August 8th, these ones here. So this becomes a little bit confusing, and I think that you should try to work this out yourself. But we have a problem that arises. And it's not a problem. It's actually, again, one of these providential things that occurs. So Josiah Lich, in laying out this prophecy, he did none of this. He does this very simple idea, and he comes to the correct date. And yet, if he had done this work, he still would have come to that date. So there's two different ways that we could have come to that date. We could have followed the biblical calendar, or we could have ignored it and just used the date July 27th, July 27th, July 27th, and counted 15 days. Now, for him to get that correctly, it's not very likely. That is, if he had, if we didn't have this history, we had some other date or some other years or spans of time, to start here on a Julian calendar and to actually end up on the right date is 1 in 30 chance that he had of doing that correctly. That is, if you had some other years. These years will always work out that way. But if he had chosen some other way of doing it, or even if he had counted here, if he could have used, of course, the Julian date, but if he had used the Gregorian date, it would not have worked out, right? So he had to have just, by providence, used this July 27th date to arrive at that date. And we're going to look at this event as well, because we're going to look at each of these events as well. Now, the thing about it, we have here some Julian dates, but we're also going to have some Gregorian dates in which events are going to be fulfilled in this history. Now, those Gregorian dates are going to precede these Julian dates. So we know nothing happens on August 8th in 1809 that relates to August 11th, 1840. But if we go 12 days earlier, so I'm going to do it like this, we have July 27th, 1809. And July 27th, 1809 is called the Treaty of Dardanelles. So I'll just write it here. Something like that, Dardanelles. Yes, that's how it's spelled. Now, this is a treaty between 5 powers, I believe England, Russia, Prussia, France, and Germany, and they're addressing Turkey. So they begin to make these series of treaties. There's some wars going on as well. And I believe this is a secret treaty, and it's signed on July 27th, or ratified, however it's understood. And this is the date that we would mark for this history, for the Treaty of Dardanelles. We mark July 27th. But this is a Gregorian date. The Julian date follows 12 days later and lines up with the 8th day of the 8th month. So there's these 12 days in there that shows up. And then we're going to look at the next event. So we go 30 years later and we come to 1839. The 26th day of the 4th month is July 27th, Julian. But once again, the event is going to occur 12 days earlier on July 27th, Gregorian. And that is a thing called the collective note. And I believe this time it's 4 powers. France isn't involved. And this collective note then is addressing what's going to happen here. Now, I'm going to explain this history a little bit more. So right now I'm giving you these events. But this collective note is then going to be formulated into the ultimatum. Now, the ultimatum is, and we're going to deal with that, but this is the ultimatum that's delivered on August 11th, 1840, to the Pasha of Egypt. Now, this ultimatum is not marked on July 27th, because July 27th lines up with the 26th day of the 4th month in 1840. But it occurs with this date, July 15th, that's the 26th day of the 4th month on the Julian calendar. So it once again gets fulfilled on July 15th this time, but July 15th is the 26th day of the 4th month. So the date that is created on the Julian calendar with the 26th day of the 4th month becomes the date on the Gregorian calendar where the events are fulfilled that mark the hour, the day, the month, and the year from August 11th to 1840. So this becomes a little bit confusing to people. And, you know, I'm trying to figure out how do you present this simply? Because it's actually an extremely important detail. So one of the things that we see is we see that we have Julian and Gregorian dates, and we're going to have those dates in our history as well, and that they're providential. We can see even with Josiah Lich's birth. So Josiah Lich is born in 1809, so he's born in this year, that his birth is on April 4th, which on the Julian date, April 4th is the first day of the first month. So we can see that everything's tied up. The prophet himself, Josiah Lich, is tied into this prophecy by his birthday. But also, this Julian-Gregorian relationship exists as well. And so this can't be ignored because it becomes a very important detail as we look at events on our line. Different events that were fulfilled already in the past, in 2018, and 2017, and 2019 as well. We sometimes were looking for events on Gregorian dates, but they were actually fulfilled on Julian dates. Or we looked back and analyzed some periods of time and found that the Julian date held the symbol that we needed, but it was matched with a Gregorian date from another line. So I know that's a lot of things to think about, because you may know some of those, but you may not know some of those. You know, but it becomes more complicated, and that's part of the problem in trying to teach it. Now, I was talking with my son, who's not an Adventist, and I was trying to explain to him all of this in like 20 minutes. And he was bringing up some objections. He says, one, well, the fact that it's so complicated, which should give you indication that, you can almost do anything with it. In reality, the complexity makes it much more difficult to have occurred randomly. So an example, maybe this analogy wouldn't necessarily work, but if I found a round stone, almost perfectly spherical in some riverbed, I might imagine that maybe somebody made it round, but I could also recognize that it is possible that a round stone can form through water erosion. It's not going to happen often, but you would find that a stone that could be very spherical can occur naturally. But if I found a watch, a gold watch, with my birthday engraved in it, my name, in some ancient coal bed, which obviously wouldn't happen, but I found it there, and I would know that that would have to be by design. Maybe it doesn't have my birthday or my name in it, but just you find a gold watch or some kind of complex piece of machinery, you're not going to assume that it occurred randomly. You would have to say it's by design. So the more complex something is, the more likely it's designed. And the complexities that exist within this structure. So we have these structures that exist, these patterns, and these patterns are extremely complex, which is the thing that witnesses to their veracity, but they're not easy to explain to people. So when we're explaining to people, we're going to explain, well, there's these dates, and we're not going to necessarily explain that July 27th Gregorian is July 27th Julian. So we just mark July 27th there. But most people aren't going to understand this, and most people aren't going to explain that when you explain the prophecy. We'll just say that July 27th is the 26th day of the fourth month, and then we will say July 27th is when these events were fulfilled. Of course, this one becomes a problem, because if you're going to say, you could just say, yeah, July 15th is the 26th day of the fourth month, but then you have this problem with the July 27th Gregorian date. So you really, in order to do this properly, you have to explain this difference. Now, there's another problem. If you go to the calendar converter and you look at 1809, 1809 does not line up with July 27th. It lines up with July 26th. Now, the calendar converter is based upon the sighting of the new moon in Jerusalem. Now, in this history here, the Adventists did not use the new moon in Jerusalem when they were predicting October 22nd, 1844. They used the new moon in Boston. Now, it's true that Josiah Lich didn't know anything about the biblical calendar in this history. He wouldn't have known about it until they got to 1843 or 1844, that he would have then had an understanding of it. He didn't end up applying it here. But if you use the new moon in Boston, in 1809, the first day of the first month is April 4th. If you use the new moon in Jerusalem, the first day of the first month is April 3rd. And I mention this for a very specific reason. So if you're teaching somebody these things, you can leave these details out, but people should at least have resources to understand that. Now, somebody may go look at our calendar converter and say, hey, this doesn't line up. And they'll say, you guys are fudging these numbers. You're just trying to make things fit. Now, the thing is, we don't even need this here. We don't need the 26th day of the fourth month in 1809 or 1839. We just need these ones, because these are the ones that we need to actually show the 26th day of the fourth month. So let's say, it happens to be off there. But I think it's in providence that we then can say that the new moon in Boston can be used in this history, in the Millerite history, and that the Millerites were correct in using the new moon in Boston for their calculations in the promised land, the new promised land, the spiritual land of Israel, which was the United States, rather than the new moon in Jerusalem. And so that's one of the arguments I use in when we're dealing with October 22nd, 1844, is that we should use the new moon in Boston. So using the new moon in Jerusalem doesn't make sense in this history. Now, most of the time, if you're using the new moon in Boston or the new moon in Jerusalem, it's not going to make the difference on a date. So rarely will that 7 hours difference show up, 6 or 7 hours difference on our clock show up in changing the day of the beginning of the first day of the first month, changing the date of it. So I know this is complex. Are people following this? So I sort of assume that your silence means that you all understand everything I'm saying. And I went fairly long here on this first part. We still have another 45 minutes, so I didn't actually take a break. Is everybody following this? Is anybody having problems with all this detail? Okay, so I'm going to assume everybody's happy with it. Now, in trying to deal with some of the problems that have arisen, so we know that in Seventh-day Adventism, all of our scholars pretty much reject this prophecy. But we do know that there are some scholars who accept it. Now, the scholars that accept it, some of them have even figured out these dates, July 27th. I have had discussions with one of them regarding the 26th day of the fourth month, but he doesn't know much about the biblical calendar. He says, it probably is correct. He doesn't really address it. So he hasn't really tried to, discredit this. He does, have this as well. So he has the July 15th. But the thing that he doesn't have, without the biblical calendar, he can't put this July 15th into this relationship. So when we get to the 27th of July in 1840, he sees there's an event on July 15th. The ultimatum is going to be delivered here on August 11th. But he doesn't see this connection because he's not looking at the Julian Gregorian calendar, for one. He's not addressing that issue. And he's not addressing the biblical calendar. Now, to address this one point, this is the big criticism that people have of Josiah Lich's prophecy. One of the two big criticisms. So the first one is they say he's got the wrong date. And most people assume, because they don't understand the Julian calendar, is that the Julian calendar is always 10 days off. So many people just think he should have got, August 21st if he had used the Julian calendar, if he had corrected it by looking at the Julian calendar back here. But of course he wouldn't. That's the one thing he wouldn't have got is August 21st. He wouldn't have got 10 days. He would have had 12 days difference because there's 12 days difference here. Or he could have gone back here and used this point, and he would have had 6 days difference. So, but the point is they see this problem of the chronology, but here we have it addressed. And this to me is an extremely powerful argument for why we can use it to predict events in our time. So nobody ever understood it before. So why is God giving us light on Josiah Lich's prophecy at the end of the world? If we're not supposed to understand these things, and in the way that we are, why is all this light that confirms this prophecy, why is it being given to us? And this would be the same argument I would make with all these different things that we found. When we study Ezra 7 to 10, and we see the chronology of 457 BC and how it connects with 1844. Or we go to Ezekiel's prophecy, and we start to recognize the significance between his dates and the dates in Millerite history, which we're going to address as we get through the study. One of the things we have to do is we have to come to a good understanding of Samuel Snow's letters. Because Josiah Lich's prophecy, without Samuel Snow's letters, doesn't really, or the prophecies of the Josiahs, doesn't really come together without Samuel Snow's letters. It was really the key that opened up everything so that we could then see these lines of prophecy, how they relate to our time. And this is part of the problem, I think that Clayton has when he's trying to say we need to be able to explain our reasons to people why we have July 18th, 2020 in some kind of simple fashion. And the more I've thought about it, every time I present it too simply, it gives all kinds of room for people to discredit it. It's not until you see the whole picture that you can see that it's not possible that it could have occurred randomly, any of these dates. When we look at Ezekiel, and then we look at Josiah Lich's prophecy, and then we tie them into Samuel Snow's letters, and all the other history that we have, all the other lines, only then can that complexity have meaning. So, in order to understand a watch, I may find a part of a watch, but I can't really explain that that's a watch. But if I have the watch and I have all the wheels within wheels, and that watch keeps perfect time, then I know that it was designed. But if I have like a piece of a watch, it doesn't mean that, it was, it could have come about naturally. Some of these parts maybe could have. But even, a cog, which is a very complex thing, people could argue that this is some kind of natural crystalline structure or something like that. But when you have a watch that keeps time, then you know that you have something that was designed. And so that's what we have here, is we have something that's designed. But it's as complex as a watch because of the wheels within wheels. So people probably should take a little bit of a break if you need to. And I'm going to just get some water here. I'm not going to stop the recording. But if you want to take a break, somebody can ask a question if they want.
I have a question.
Okay.
You've done the thing for 36 years for Jehoiachin at the beginning, and then you've 36 years at the end.
Yeah, so
87. But I'm just, I know it's not really related to that, but I'm just sort of I'm picking up how you count.
Yeah.
Now you have 36 years. You're counting it based on the 37th year of Jehoiachin when he's released.
Yes.
We find that in Jeremiah 52.
Yeah. So it's called the 37th year because in Jeremiah he's counting different than Ezekiel is. So Ezekiel actually would have called it his 36th year, based on how.
Okay, in what way are they counting differently? Can you explain that?
Yeah, because when Ezekiel's counting the years of the captivity, he's counting as if Jehoiachin was actually reigning, where Jeremiah is just counting ordinally from when he was taken captive. So they're different. So you actually almost have a whole extra year in Ezekiel's count, because he's counting an accession year and then a first year. And with Jehoiachin, he's counting fall to fall. And that's not how Jeremiah's counting when he gives his 37th year of. And it's just really clear because we know exactly when he was released from prison. It tells us that it's Evil Merodach released him in prison at the beginning of his reign. So I know it's a real detailed point, but when I worked it out, that was the only way it worked out. Is he was released in March of 461 BC, and we know that he went into captivity in 597. So when you look at that, it ends up being like this. So that's not it. Here it is. So to try to count this out, this is a good question. So you have all these years. So you got all these years, 1 to 36. And we know that Jehoiachin, his reign is fall to fall. Now when he becomes king here, we got 597. It's not, he becomes king shortly after, like it's in December. So he has an accession year that exists here. Now he, of course, is taken captive, and then Zedekiah gets put on the throne. But we can show, when I go through Ezekiel, that he's counting the years, when he says the 5th year of the captivity, that he's counting 596 as the first year. And then the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th would end up being 5, 4, 3, 2. So this is 592 when he has his vision on July 21st. So it's in the 5th year of the captivity. But technically, if you were going to count it, you would say the 6th year of the captivity if you were just counting from when he was taken captive. But he's not. He's counting it as if Josiah was reigning. And that's one of the things I showed in other studies dealing with how to count the reign of Josiah and how to count the years of the captivity. So when you keep counting this way, the 666th year is going to line up with 70 AD. And then the 36th year, somewhere over here, so you're going to have the 36th year. This is going to line up with 561 BC. And so you can see that the number of years here is 36 to get to this. But Jeremiah calls it the 37th year. Ezekiel would have called it the 36th year. But the other thing is, we know exactly when Evo Merodach came to the throne, and it tells us exactly when he released him from prison. So we know it was in the year he began to reign, and so shortly after he came to the throne, he released Jehoiachin from prison. So that's 561. So it's not 37 years. It's the 37th year, but it would be called the 36th year by Ezekiel. And so when you get to 70 AD, you have two different counts. You can either call this the 666th year according to Ezekiel's count, or you could call it 660 years according to Jeremiah's count, if you wanted to be counting from when Jehoiachin was taken captive. So hopefully that helps answer your question.
Yes, thanks.
Okay, but yeah, it's these little puzzles, like there's thousands of them, little things like this that you have to work out the detail. And because they're wheels within wheels, let's say you try to move one, you have a watch and you try to, fix one of the gears, and you take out a tooth and you got this smaller gear or a bigger gear, and then you try to put it back in that watch. The watch isn't going to work. And this is kind of what it's like when you're dealing with chronology. You have all these little parts, and every little detail has to fit, and it has to fit perfectly. And we can't just assume things. We have to say, if I'm going to think it's 37 years, how do I get that to fit? Does it make any sense, with Ezekiel and Jeremiah and trying to match them together? So you can see that Jeremiah is just counting the normal, ordinal way of counting from an event. The first year is when it happens. But Ezekiel is not, because if he was, none of his chronology makes sense. It doesn't fit with history or with the Bible. You have to have that accession year in the count of the captivity, which would be an odd thing to do, right? Unless you're counting Jehoiachin's reign as if it is still occurring. And the way that I think that Ezekiel looked at it is Jehoiachin is really king, not Zedekiah. Zedekiah is just a puppet king placed on the throne by Nebuchadnezzar, even though he is a son of Josiah. So hopefully that helps. So in coming back to this, we're not done, and we're not going to get to July 18th yet with this, because I have a bunch of other things that I want to show you about this prophecy itself. So we have laid down Josiah Lich's prophecy. So the first thing that we have problems with is the chronology. The second thing has to do with, and the chronology is addressed in different ways. So if you go to Wikipedia and you look up this date here, July 27th, for the start of the Ottoman Empire, you're going to get the date, not 1299, but 1301. And some people would even put 1302. And I don't know if I know that I put it in my papers, a reference to a paper by Alberto Treaty, and he's an Adventist scholar. And he shows clearly that it was actually July 27th, 1299, the Battle of Baphius, which actually begins the Ottoman Empire. And now, of course, Turkey recognizes July 27th, 1299, not 1301. So modern scholarship has tried to destroy this. And I can see that a lot of the motive, not necessarily for Wikipedia, because Wikipedia is just putting dates there, but a lot of the motives for the scholars actually goes back to Josiah Lich's prophecy as a way of attacking it, especially when you have Adventist scholars who are actually mostly interested in the date in the first place. So they've actually had a huge influence of why it's not 1299 and why it's 1301 or 1302 in a lot of the modern scholarly references. And then you have problems with the end itself, the event. So the Ottoman Empire did not fall on August 11th, 1840 in the way that people look at it. Now, the event that we have here, we have the Treaty of Dardanelles, that occurred, and we have the collective note, that occurred, and we have this ultimatum, and this ultimatum was delivered on August 11th. And what that ultimatum did is it was basically, it was either going to be accepted or rejected by Egypt. Now, in this case, it was the protection. Turkey was asking for the protection of the four European powers against Egypt. And when this ultimatum was delivered, it meant that now officially Turkey was under the protection of the four Turkish or the four European powers. And this goes back to the beginning of the prophecy where Constantine the 11th submitted to the four Turkish sultans. So you have the four Turkish sultans at the end, and you have the four European powers, or at the beginning, and you have the four European powers at the end. So the end and the beginning are connected by these symbols. But some people just try to discredit that. And they try to say, well, the ultimatum was signed earlier. Why are you picking this event? Historically, though, it was when that ultimatum was delivered and the news of that came back to the United States that the Millerite movement saw the year-day principle was correct. Now, when we look at what they expected, of course, they felt that that was the end of Turkey, but Turkey didn't end. Now, Turkey didn't, it continued to go on for a lot longer period of time until the 1920s. And I'm going to bring this up here. I'm going to just go right straight to Wikipedia here and find something interesting. So, see if I can find this. Probably should have this prepared. So it's in Wikipedia, the abolition of the Turkish Sultanate. So we're going to go here. And The abolition of the Turkish Sultanate, it's probably hard to read on here, the Grand National Assembly, by the Grand National Assembly of Turkey on the 1st of November, 1922, ended the Ottoman Empire, which had lasted since 1299. So one thing you'll find is that Wikipedia is inconsistent when they address these things. Now, I'm going to go then to the calendar converter, and I'm going to go to this date. So I'm going to go to 1922, and I'm going to go to November 1st. And when I look at that date, I don't know if you can see it. Maybe I'll try to blow it up here so everybody can see it. Oops, it's way too big. You can see there that November 1st, 1922 is on the biblical calendar the 11th day of the 8th month. And what is the 11th day of the 8th month in 1840? It's August 11th, using our calendar. So he's predicting a date, which I better remember to do this. So he's predicting a date here, August 11th, but actually it's not till 1922 that what he is expecting, which is the fall of the Ottoman Empire, the end of the Ottoman Empire, it does not occur till November 1st, 1922, which on the biblical calendar is the 11th day of the 8th month. So this is delayed, and you could look at this something like, 34 AD maybe and 70 AD, something like that, the close of probation for the Jews and the destruction of Jerusalem. But another way to look at it is that we have these symbols, here are these dates, and this becomes a symbol as well. 8th month, 11th day, or 11th day, 8th month. And he's then predicting an event here just with this symbol. So obviously the prophecy is fulfilled here. I'm not saying that it's not, but I'm just saying that there's an echo of it that happens here where we can see that that symbol becomes significant. So it shows that even here, he's predicting an event in the future that he's not predicting, right? Josiah Lich, in making his prediction, he's not predicting this, though this is the event he's looking for. But he sees it as this fulfillment, but he is also predicting this event, because we can then look back and say, well, the end of the Ottoman Empire, which is what he is talking about, is prefigured here by this ultimatum being delivered on August 11th, 1840. Now, we then, of course, we're going to take this and go further into the future, but we do the same thing with Ezekiel. So with Ezekiel, we have basically, he's predicting the 10th day of the 5th month in 586, but he's also predicting the 10th day of the 5th month in 70 AD, but he's also going to be predicting the 10th day of the 5th month in 2020. And then we're going to see this also with Josiah Lich. He's predicting this event, which also prefigures this event, but we can then take this and project it into the future, and we can get the 26th day. So I could put it like this. I could put this is August 11th. This is November 1st, 1922. And this is going to be the 26th day of the 4th month in 2020. So we're going to show how we can do this. We can lay these prophecies over top of each other and show that they're prefiguring events. And obviously the destruction of Jerusalem here and the destruction of Jerusalem here are put together, typify this event. And then we can see here what happens in August 11th and in November 1st, typify a further event. that's going to be prefigured by this. And this is also connected to other events as well. So we would have Hiroshima and Pearl Harbor, and all these different events are all connected with this history. So you can see that there becomes more and more complexity that actually establishes that this is true. It creates more and more improbabilities that you would add, multiply into the possibilities that these things occurred randomly. So the complexity, instead of being, as my son suggests, an argument against it, it's actually an argument for it. And you can't just pick that many dates and have them all work out just by chance. Now, the other part that I want to deal with is the 391 years. And we've got about 20 minutes, and we'll see how this part works out. So these are the things I have the hardest time explaining to people. But they deal with a bit of astronomy, understanding of calendars in a bit more detail. So we have this period of time. We're going to put 1449 here. And I'm going to go July 27th. Oops, I'll put it up here. So July 27th, 1449, which is the 26th day of the 4th month. And then I'm going to put July 27th over here. Maybe I'll put it a bit closer. July 27th, 1840. And this is just a period of 391 years. So we don't have the 15 days in there. Now, the Islamic date, so we're now going to introduce actually two different calendars. I don't know if I can get them all introduced here, but at least introduce the Islamic calendar. So the Islamic calendar is similar to the biblical calendar in that it is based upon the observance of the moon. So the biblical calendar is what we call a luni or lunar solar calendar. But the Islamic calendar is a lunar calendar. So this means that the Islamic calendar does not adjust for the year. It's just purely a moon calendar. Now, what the Jews do is every second or third year, they add an extra month. And over a period of 19 years, on average, you would have 7 years. So this is a period of 19 years. You would have 7 years that are going to have, we'll just mark them here. You're going to have some of these years that are going to have 13 months. But all the other years are going to have 12 months. And so over a period of 19 years, you're going to have 12 times 19 plus 7 months, which is a period of 235 months. So this becomes a really important symbol as well. So this is called the Metonic cycle, named after a Greek mathematician named Meton. It was understood by the Babylonians because they also have a lunar solar calendar, and they just noticed over time that they could just continually repeat the cycle, and most of the time it was going to be the same. Now the Islamic calendar doesn't add these, so they have a different cycle completely in how theirs works. But basically, they just have a year of 354 days. Now, the biblical year, when it's seen over a period of time like this, is actually more accurate than the Gregorian calendar. Now we have, of course, it depends how you look at it, but the Gregorian calendar, we have leap days, same with the Julian calendar, to keep the year in alignment with the sun. But our months then don't follow the moon. But the biblical calendar, they want the months to follow the moon. But when they come to the spring equinox, and it's the end of the year, and it's always the first new moon after the spring equinox. If there is no spring equinox, then they add a 13th month. Now they figured out a system, the modern rabbinic calendar figures out a system, and it doesn't use the equinox in the same way. They put the full moon nearest the spring equinox, which creates differences between the biblical and the rabbinic. But the point is, this calendar here, when it comes to compare to a solar calendar of 365 days, is about 11 days off. And that means, since they don't adjust the year, every year, Ramadan is going to be 11 days earlier than it was the year before. So Ramadan keeps cycling through the year. Now, when it comes to, again, to the same time of the year, it's going to have gone around one solar year, but there's a certain period of time, and that would be figured out by taking 11 days and adding them up until you get a solar year. So now it's not exactly 354 days. Sometimes they do have a leap day to adjust. So they'll have 355 days because their calendar doesn't match the moon. So it's based upon the moon. So occasionally they will have an extra day at the end of the year. So they have a leap day at the end of the year. But it will work out this way. Now, in a period of time when their seasons come all the way around, they will have had one extra year in the time that we've had. And that is in the time that we have 32, and we'll say just 32 and a half years, they will have covered 33 and a half years. Now, it's not exactly that amount, but you can see that they go through this period of time because they're 11 days behind. Eventually, we'll have gone through 32 and a half years, and they will have covered 33 years. But this is really a period of 32 years. I'll just do it this way, it's easier, in 7 months. And then you can see that even though they line up, they're not in full years. That is, in order for them to line up so that January 1st goes all the way around, if we started on January 1st and they started on their first day of their first month, they would finally come and line up over a longer period of time than this. Now, this period of time here, though, on our calendar is 32 times 12, which is 384 months. Now, these are our months, and this confuses people because our months are longer than their months. Our months are 30.44 days. Their months are 29.5306 days long. So our months are longer. So in this period of time, which is 32 years and 7 months, of our months, we will have experienced 384 plus these 7 months. And so this is 391 months. Now, where do we see this number? We see this number here in the 391 years. So the Islamic calendar lines up with our calendar. When we go through 32 years and 7 months, they go through 33 years and 7 months. So 1 year extra. Now their months are shorter. So they actually end up covering 403 months in that same period of time. So their months are shorter than our month by about a half of a day. Actually, it's almost a whole day, because our month is 30.44, and their month is 29.53. So you can see they're almost a whole day difference between the length of our month and the lunar month. So this number here, of course, becomes very interesting because this is 391. Now, this cycle here, as you can see, doesn't really cover whole years. For them to have the whole year cycle go through, you would need to have a longer period of time. Now, what we end up doing is we take this period of time here and this period of time here, they both equal the same number of days, right? Because of the same period of time, they're just measured differently. We have a different yardstick. They're using years that are shorter, and they're using months that are shorter. But this period of time equals 11,900 days and 20 hours. This is the period of time that they go through 1 year more than us on their calendar. So, and that's of course inconvenient for these people because they age faster. But if you keep your birthday on an Islamic calendar, you're 33 years and 7 months, when somebody who's using the Gregorian would only be 32 years and 7 months. But it's the same period of time. And of course, we can see some symbolism here, 11:9. So, you know, we can see already symbols that we could apply to Islam, because this could be, you know, September 11th, if you wanted to see it that way. And we have the 391. But if I was going to look at this whole period of time here, I would find that I could fit 12 of these periods in this period of time. And of course, 12 is a significant number. So if I divided this up, I have 12 periods of time here. Each one of these would be 391 months. And of course, you can see if you take 391 and you multiply it by 12, 391 months multiplied by 12, you would have 391 years, right? So this period of time here is this many days and hours times 12. And when you look at the number, it's just simply 142,810 days. So that's how many days this is, 142,810 days. And now we could also call this 403 months, but it would still be the same number of days, because I would have a month 403 that is shorter. So that it's still this amount of Islamic months, and this amount of Gregorian months is still this amount of days. So it doesn't matter which way I count it. Now this period of days here, this is an astronomical phenomenon. That is, since the solar year and the lunar year are aligning, when you start here and you look at lunar eclipses, if you take a cycle of 391 years and you come here, you're going to find that pretty much your lunar eclipses are going to follow the same pattern that they did in this period of 391 years. So it's a natural cycle of lunar eclipses. Now, we all know that Islam, one of their symbols is the crescent. And we know that this idea here, that this cycle is a natural cycle, and that it's used in Revelation, and it's used in Revelation in a very simple way. If you just take a day, a month, and a year in prophetic time, that it's going to actually add up to this cycle is something that's extremely unlikely. Now, I know not everybody understands what I just did here, because I've shown this to people before, and it took me a long time to understand it. Now, it is in my papers on the calendars. It's probably even more complex there. But this cycle of 142,810 days is just a natural cycle. It's not something that's artificial. So this period of 391 years, from July 27th, 1449 to July 27th, 1840, on the Islamic calendar, I believe it's the 10th day of the 26th day of the 10th month. And it's the same here, 26th day of the 10th month. So their calendar has perfectly aligned with ours, and it takes 391 years to do that. Doesn't take less time. Now, it aligns here, but not on the months. This is not a full year. But when we multiply it here, we can see these are 391 full years. And there's more to this that I'm going to deal with, I'm not going to address now, because we start to recognize that I could actually predict the events that are going to happen on July 18th, 2020, without using Ezekiel and without using some of the other ways in which we predict July 18th. I could have figured it out using the Mayan calendar, which is another calendar that we have to introduce. So I want people to try to understand this. I mean, you might not show this to everyone as far as in the detail that I've shown. You might just say that this is a natural cycle of the ecliptic. You can find some quotes where they talk about this online. But the idea of this, to me, is extremely remarkable. And it opened up a whole different way of looking at this prophecy of Revelation 9, of looking at the time elements. So, now that I have the Islamic calendar, and I'm going to deal with that as well, as far as when we start looking into the future, a lot of these details, we've sort of forgotten about them because they haven't been presented in a big way. I might have done some presentations, maybe Stephen and Odilio mentioned some of these things, I don't know. But nobody really comprehends what we're talking about when we start introducing these other calendars. And now we're introducing the Mayan calendar. And it started here, it didn't really start here, it started earlier. But as far as using it to predict the future, it was when I started to recognize something about this period of time and how it's connected. So the only thing I will show you is something interesting. This period of time here, it's almost 144,000, right? We could say it that way. But it's the way that it's almost 144,000 that's interesting. So this period of time is based upon 12 times 11,900 days and 20 hours. And if I take 144,000, and that's why I come to the Mayan calendar, because that's one Baktun. That's a period of where it's like an epic that they have on their calendar. And I subtract 142,810. I get this number, 1190. I get 1,190, which is 1/10 of this number. So this number here is 1/12, 1/10 of 1/12, I guess we could put it that way. 1/10 of 1/12, this is 1/12. So I take 1/10 of this, which is 1/12 of this, to get this. So if I take 142,810, and I divide it by 12, and then I divide it by 10, I end up with this number, 1190. And so that's where I'm going to leave you today. So you can see that there's something here that we've missed. Josiah Lich had no idea about this. He never knew that the cycle of the ecliptic was 391 years to the day. And it's only like a few hours off. So this cycle can be used in astronomy and is used in astronomy. So, it's something for us to consider as we start to look at Josiah Lich's prophecy, that there's a whole bunch of light that can come from it if we start to analyze things in different ways. And we can see that these things are not arbitrary. So Josiah Lich's prophecy, the period of time there, is extremely significant. We also know it's 391 years for the prophecy that we have in Ezekiel. So Josiah's prophecy connected with the reign of the kings. Now it's 391 years and a half. But any final questions on here before we pray? Was anybody able to grasp any of this? I don't know.
Hi, Theodore. It's Brian.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry. I just joined a couple minutes ago. I'm also working at home online with my job, but
later.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I'm happy to be here now.
Okay. Okay. Well, let's close with prayer, and
okay.
Then we can talk a little bit maybe after. Dear Father in heaven, thank you for this day and for the time that we had here in this study. We know that it's hard to understand and to grasp these things. It's not easy. It wasn't easy for me. I don't expect it's easy for others. But we know that there are things that we can discern as we study these details out. Thank you for the gift of prophecy to your prophets who have prophesied things that have come to pass. And we ask, Lord, that your Spirit can continue to provide that gift as we see it in your word. That as the study of your word will reveal these things that are coming upon the earth. Help us to trust in your word and the things that have been revealed. And we pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.